Around. All right, so hopefully, Lord willing, my voice will hold up one more class. For those of you who are just joining us, I taught the first class. Justin has, I guess, the flu or something. So we taught Holy Grail Part 1 again. And the reason we did, the first time we did it in December, the mics weren't working. As you can see, I got a mic here, mic here. If it don't work now, forget it. But we retaught that. So if you had heard it the first time, you're good. If you hadn't heard it the first time, it'll be online and you can go through that. But we're going into part 2 at this moment. All right. So this will go, hopefully I can hold out. I don't know that I'll hold out an hour, but either way, I'll give you some information. What I was telling class, first part of the class, I'm going to do tonight, and then next week, you need a cough drop? All right. I'm going to do tonight's both classes. Probably next week will be on Holy Grail Bloodline families again. But then after that, I'm going to switch it up a little bit, and I'm going to dive into the book of Job, Lord willing, verse by verse, and go through it. I'm going to do that for a couple reasons. When I started out Corey Coffee and Conspiracy, probably 6-7 years ago, it was a summertime event. So I'd have all winter long, or fall, winter, and spring, to put together 7 weeks in the summer. And this is back when Brian and I were coming up with ways to try to get people to come out on summertime, lighten the load for the kids. And it was to get we shut down choir practice back in those days. Now it's gotten to be its own animal. And let me explain something to you. Studying the Bible comes very easy. Trying to study out all these conspiracy theories after a while gets a little mind-boggling. I'm running a company, and I'm still at the point right now, still running the Sunday morning stuff, and so it's getting a little much. And so I'm going to switch over to doing what comes naturally, which is the Word of God. Now, for those of you that are like, good, I don't like Corey Coffee and Conspiracy anyway, well, you probably won't like the book of Job then. And the reason being is the book of Job is about as prophetic as any other book in the Bible. Listen, if you understand how much of the book of Job applies to the Jewish Israel nation during the tribulation, you're going to be blown away. And we'll talk about that. So let's dive into tonight in part 2 of where we're at. And as every week, we will always look at this. 2 Corinthians 4:4, in whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds. Who's the God of this world? It's Satan. So one of the things that will set me off is some Christian who thinks everything they see on television is what it is, and that the government never lies to them, and that we're all a bunch of freak shows because we believe that the world is working as a conspiracy to come together for a one world government. When you say that stuff, they're like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Do you read a Bible? Like literally it tells you the whole world is going to be one. Why is that shocking to you to see that come together? And so we know that he's the God of this world. And this has been our outline, and he uses everything on this board and so much more to work all his plan together. And when you say, well, golly, can you imagine how many people would have to be involved to have a conspiracy that big? Not that many. The God of this world, who is controlling everybody like Geppetto and your puppet on a string, right? And so the bottom line is he works through governments and through militaries and sciences and all kinds of goofiness to work his plan. What's his plan? He wants to be like the Most High. He wants to be worshiped. So everything you ever see on these boards and what we teach is all designed to bring Lucifer, Satan, worship. And nothing more could prove that than the very topic that we're on right now, which is the bloodline families, okay? So we talked about the Holy Grail, okay? And what is the Holy Grail? So, well, I'll get to that in just a second. The Holy Grail, if you ask most people, especially those that are into Indiana Jones, it's some cup that Jesus had at the Last Supper, and he said, hey, here, take this. This is a cup of my New Testament, drink the blood, all that. And others believe, no, it's more than that. It's the cup that the vinegar and the gall was in when they offered up to him. And that's not true either. But then they also believe that it's the same cup that he had at the Last Supper that Joseph of Arimathea went and actually collected blood off of Jesus on the cross in. And then if you go even further, you're going to come to find out that the Holy Grail, the chalice, is so much more than that because it actually comes back to bloodline. All right, so the word Holy Grail in Latin, when you work it out, you come to find out it literally means holy blood. And so the story is Jesus and Mary Magdalene got married after Jesus got off the cross. Well, they got married in Bethany. He died, quote unquote, goes on the cross, but he doesn't die. He goes in a coma-like state. They think he's dead. They pull him off the cross. Joseph of Arimathea and Mary Magdalene pull him into a nice, cool cave, nurse him up. He comes back to life, has kids with his wife. His third son is Josephus. Josephus is taken by Joseph of Arimathea over to the Celtic kingdoms of Scotland. While there, he intermingles in with the Celtic dynasty that came from the giants of Genesis 6. Once married into that, having kids, then he intermingles with the Merovingian bloodline. Now, the Merovingian bloodline is one of the 13 families that are still running this planet, and they're doing it mainly through the family name of the Pacers, right? And Lord willing, next week we'll talk a little bit about the Pacers. This is important because the coming Antichrist will claim kingship because he will say, I'm not only a descendant of David, I'm a descendant of Aaron, and I'm a descendant of Jesus Christ. And he'll sit on his throne in Jerusalem as the king of Jerusalem. Oh, by the way, and a king descendant of Saul. That is, to the Gnostic belief system, what the Holy Grail is. So, as I told the first class, go watch the Da Vinci Code, and it'll kind of give you an idea of what I just said in a nutshell. Now, for those of you that are freaked out, oh, I can't watch that movie, my pastor told me not to, well, then don't. But if you go to this church, your pastor's telling you go ahead and watch it, it'll be all right, right? It's not that big of a deal, guys. We get rattled by stuff. I remember when the Noah's Ark with, what's that guy, the good-looking Russell Crowe guy? Yeah, he was in Noah's Ark or did a Noah's Ark thing, and the whole place went nuts. And I'm like, guys, stop freaking out that Hollywood is doing something. I mean, imagine that. Now, at the end of the day, it's good entertainment. It will help you understand how they believe. So the royal bloodlines of this planet believe they are different than you and I. And they believe it because they believe they come from royalty. Therefore, they have a right to the claim of the throne. Okay? Now, there we go. The Priory of Scion, all right? Now, I don't know if you watched the movie, this is talked about in there. And I'm going to be very careful on how I teach this Priory of Scion. This whole thing is an actual symbol. That symbol was created in the actual 1950s, but it is connected to them. Now, the Priory of Scion, this is a brotherhood. That was probably not a good idea to copy-paste that because that's not good blow up there. The Brotherhood was established in France in 1956 by Pierre Plantard to attract an elite group of influential people whom would recognize him as the great monarch and prophesied by Nostradamus. All right. Now, the Priory of Scion, if you even study the Da Vinci Code or watch it, these are the people who are in charge of guarding the truth or the knowledge that has been passed down concerning the bloodline of Jesus Christ's descendants. Okay, now, if you go and study this, you got to be careful because most people go, oh, it's all garbage. This guy was garbage, right? But if you go and you study more, the Priory of Scion is an order of secret society founded by crusading knight Godfrey de Bouillon. Remember in the first class, we talked about him. He's one of the crusaders. He's the one of the guys that establishes the Knights Templar, right? And he does it on Mount Zion in the kingdom of Jerusalem in 1099 under the guise of historical monastic order of the Abbey of Our Lady of Mount Zion as a framework of the grandiose assertion of being both the great monarch. The Priory of Scion was engaged in a centuries-long benevolent conspiracy to install a secret bloodline of the Merovingian dynasty of the thrones of France and the rest of Europe. This was with the belief of having the bloodline of Jesus. David Hatcher Childress notes that the Sinclair clan, and man, if you're going to study this more, the Sinclairs are the ones you need to study, all right, became the Scottish guardians for the preservation of the Templar Rex Deus, Priory of Scion, Gnostic dreams. Now remember, in the first class we talked about the Rex Deus. What is that? It's not just the bloodline of Jesus, it's a bloodline going back to King David, especially King David, and then even back to Aaron, the high priest. Now, that's what we know as the Rex Deus. But now the Rex Deus not only has King David and Aaron, but it has Jesus Christ himself. Now, the Scottish Templar alliance began in 1128 when the Templars, founded by Hugh de Payon, met with King David I of Scotland. Not King David of the Bible, all right? No doubt at the instigation of one of the founding Templar knights, Henry Sinclair, or Henry, it's Henry Sinclair, after the Council of whatever that is, after which St. Bernard, we'll go with that guy, integrates Scotland's Celtic Christian church within the opulent but secret Gnostic Cistercian order, which also hid itself within Catholicism. When King David ascended to the throne, the Celtic Christian church was ailing financially, and the elders felt that it could be best survived inside the protective wrap of St. Bernard's wealth, influence, and power. The Cistercian, what is it? Cistercian order. The Cistercian order was not attached to the Rome, and for some reason it was permitted by Rome to operate almost as a separate autonomous arm at the time. Thus, all the abbeys of Scotland then become those things, abbeys. All right? Now, this is Rosalind's chapel. Now, Rosalind's chapel is tied in with the Templars. Once again, referring back to the movie, why do you think it starts out in Rome? In Paris, France. And by the way, if you study the word Paris, it goes back to a giant of Genesis 6 that got the thing started. But either way, this thing starts at the Louvre, right? Guy dies. They're trying to trace this thing down. He's a Priory of Scion guy. And this thing ends up all the way in Scotland where they find the bloodline. Where? Rosalind's chapel. Okay, it's all tied together because of the way it works. Now, all right, so let's talk about bloodlines for just a second. Now that we've covered the Priory of Scion, all right, I'm gonna just show you this 6-minute video because I can sit here and explain it. This guy will do better in 6 minutes than I can do all class. Now, when we're talking bloodlines, do you realize how many people are related? Almost every major Hollywood superstar is related. And they're related to the presidents, who are related to royalty in Europe. Now, what's the chances? What's the chances that somebody really good at acting just so happens to be connected to a president? And by the way, why are all the presidents related? Including your boy Trump. You ever look into this and notice, hey, people are just not just come out of nowhere. And we make it sound like, yeah, he was just a poor peanut farmer down there in Georgia and got elected as president. Believe me, he did not. Everybody is connected when you see this. So now, let's just play this and we'll take it from there. Now, you can read it as you go.
and His Royal Highness Prince Charles, who can trace his ancestry back to Romania's dark and distant past.
The genealogy shows that I'm descended from Vlad the Impaler, so I do have a bit of a stake in the country.
As it were.
Cheney's not his only connection to the White House. Obama is distantly related to 6 presidents: George W. and George H.W. Bush, Gerald Ford, Lyndon Johnson, Harry S. Truman, and James Madison. Obama's family tree also includes Sir Winston Churchill and Civil War General Robert E. Lee. And turns out, the Illinois senator got his cousin's endorsement when Brad Pitt threw his support Obama's way. Angelina Jolie's yet to say whom she supports. Maybe word she's related to Hillary Clinton will be persuasive. Clinton's other distant cousins include singers Madonna, Celine Dion, and Alanis Morissette. She's also related to beatnik author Jack Kerouac and the wife of Prince Charles of England.
Many of the United States presidents have blood relations with each other. The Bush lineage has blood ties to a great number of former presidents. George Washington, Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses Grant, Rutherford Hayes, James Garfield, Grover Cleveland, Teddy Roosevelt, William Taft, Calvin Coolidge, Herbert Hoover, Franklin Roosevelt, Richard Nixon, and Gerald Ford. Michael Tessarion points out in his work that Bush is closely related to every European monarch on and off the throne, and has kinship with every member of Britain's royal family. Bush's family tree can be documented as far back as the early 15th century. He has a direct descent from Henry III and from Henry VIII's sister Mary Tudor. He is also descended from Charles II of England. And we also find that George W. Bush is a direct descendant of Godfrey de Bouillon. Godfrey was the first king of Jerusalem after he recaptured it from the Saracens, which was the name for the Islamic faith during the Middle Ages. It is interesting to note that the current occupation of the United States in the Middle East was re-established by the same family, George Bush Sr. in 1991, and again by George Bush Jr. in 2003. George Bush Jr. is then found to be a cousin to both opposing candidates of his 2 terms in office, Al Gore and John Kerry. Democratic President Barack Obama also has blood ties with George W. Bush, as well as Gerald Ford, Lyndon Johnson, Harry Truman, James Madison, and the British Prime Minister Sir Winston Churchill. On the opposing side of the 2008 presidential ballot, John McCain is descended from Robert the Bruce, King William I of Scotland, and also Godfrey de Bouillon.
Now that we know Vice President Dick Cheney and Senator Barack Obama are distant cousins, the New York Post decided to check into the genealogy of President Bush, and his family tree has people talking. Early show national correspondent Tracy Smith has the story of George W. Bush's many relations.
Check out this family tree, done with research by Ancestry.com. Let me take you through this, branch by branch. Vice President Dick Cheney, the man who's only a heartbeat away from the presidency, is actually a blood relation. He's President Bush's 9th cousin once removed. Cheney's cousin Barack Obama is also Bush's 11th cousin and the 9th cousin of Brad Pitt. But we're only just getting started. President Lincoln was President Bush's 7th cousin 5 times removed. And Bush shared more than just a ballot with John Kerry. That's right, they're 9th cousins twice removed.
Really?
Think of that.
Yeah, I've never seen Chen.
There's also royalty in the Bush bloodline. Princess Diana was Bush's 11th cousin twice removed. And then there's this bombshell, her 9th cousin 3 times removed. He's also related to Playboy founder Hugh Hefner, even Pocahontas, and Vlad the Impaler. Trace the family tree far enough, and you get Madonna, Celine Dion, and Tom Hanks.
All right, let's switch that up. Just by happenstance, right? All these folks just happen to be connected, and they all end up in power somewhere. When you start to realize that the elites and the royals and all them, once again, every one of these people think we're different than you. And they're going to ultimately claim we're different than you because we're different descendants. We have royalty blood. And all of them are going to tell you it goes back to Genesis 6, to where the Watchers came down. Now, it depends on how you want to decipher Genesis 6. From a biblicist standpoint, we would tell you it's fallen angels. To the morons walking around on the streets, they would think it's the Anunnaki or the alien race. The reptilians from Draco, whatever, fill in the blank. What I'm going to tell you is it's obviously fallen angels who came down and procreated women. Now, here's what's interesting. The average Christian don't believe Genesis 6 the way we teach it in this church, which is interesting because, well, then how you explain all this stuff? And if Genesis 6 didn't happen the way that we think it happened, then God is a messed up dude when he looks at David and says, go in and kill everything. Like, I don't want nothing living. Joshua, go into that city, and I want it all dead. Saul, I don't even want the animals alive. So if you don't believe Genesis 6, that fallen angels came and cohabitated with women, then you have to come to the understanding that God's kind of on an ego trip because he's just killing women and children. Even we, as lost individuals in this planet, would understand, well, you don't do that. You don't kill the women and the children, you kill the men, right? I mean, that's one of the rules of war. Well, not in God's world, but then when you start to realize, oh, he's trying to cleanse genetically a place, not just humanly, but with the animals, all that stuff makes sense. So let's talk about your boys, the Windsors, right? All right? This is what we know as the most famous royal family to this day. All right? And everybody. I mean, how many of you women in the 80s got up to watch that wedding? Right? I remember Alexis is born, and 2 days later, Princess Diana gets killed, and we're about to go to church one Sunday morning, and all that's going on. There's a funeral, and she's over here freaking out, and and I'm like, the only prince I've ever known sang Purple Rain, so I don't recognize any of them. Right? So now, bottom line is, if you start diving into these guys, remember that's the guy that just said I'm related to Vlad the Impaler, and we're going to talk about him a little bit more in just a second. Vlad the Impaler is where the story of Dracula comes from, which is the ideology of vampires. Okay, what do vampires do? They drink blood. We'll talk about that in just a second. All right, but here's your royal family, right? The House of Windsor is the reigning royal house of the United Kingdom and the other Commonwealth realm. In 1901, the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, a branch of the House of Winton, and I don't have time to take you through that, but that goes back to the Merovingians, all right, succeeded the House of the Hanovers to the British monarchy with the ascension of King Edward VII, son of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. Saxe-Coburg Gotha in 1917, the name of the British royal house was changed from the German Saxe-Coburg-Gotha to the English Windsor because the anti-German sentiment in the United Kingdom during World War I. Okay, I told you all that because their name used to not be the Windsors. Right? They had to change it because they are part German descent. Well, when you're the when you're the king and queen over a country that is fighting another country and you happen to be from both of them, that's not a real good look. Not a real good look at all. And so they had to change that whole thing. And the reason that's important is because if you're going to study bloodlines, what you have to do is you find out that these guys change their names constantly. The Rothschilds wasn't the Rothschilds. They were the Bowers. And so when you're studying stuff, all of a sudden you come to a dead end and you go, well, what happened? Well, they changed their name. Well, why would they do that? Because their father, the devil, does it all the time. He just changes his clothes. Book of Job will teach you that. All right, now, did you know that Queen Elizabeth II is related to Vlad the Impaler, making Prince Charles the heir to Dracula's bloodline? Now, yeah, we'll come back to that in just a second. Now, watch this. Now, I can give you all the way back to Adam. Now, this is a place called JesusEvidence.org. And they're going to show you how that your boy Prince Charles and Prince William and now Prince George, the little bitty dude, all can come back to David. And you can go all the way down. We know all these, right? King David, Solomon, Rehoboam. Listen, if you read your Bible, you can get all these. And you get to the end and there's Zedekiah. And they say, okay, well, that's it. That's the end of the lineage, right? No, Zedekiah has a daughter, and she ends up as a queen, T-type, whatever her name is, and she ends up over here in Ireland. And she starts to lay it down, and from her, we start going all the way back down here, and this brings us in all the way down to here, to the kings of Scotland. I'm not going to read all these to you. If you want to see this, I just gave you the website. Because now all of a sudden you come in here to the kings of Scotland and you start finding out about Malcolm the First, Malcolm the Second, and so forth. Do you know the last Malcolm was the 9th? Now, do you think that guy in New York's actually called Malcolm X, or do you think he might be the 10th? Just a thought. Maybe you want to run that sometimes. All right, now, and it comes all the way down here to the King James the Fourth of Scotland, and it splits off. Here's the British royal family. Brings you all the way down 158 generations later to that little boy over there that we just saw in the picture. Now you say, is any of that true? I don't know. It's a website telling you it's got to be, right? But at the end of the day, what I'm telling you is they believe they are descendants of David, intermingled with Merovingian and Jesus' bloodline. Now, so let's look at the bloodlines of the Illuminati, okay? We have the 13 families that I've laid out before, and I told you that Merovingian family is the key one, in my opinion, because that's that dynasty over there that covers, when we think of the Franks and the Merovingians and the Holy Roman Empire, it's covering more than just France itself. It's over into Spain. It's over into Italy and up into Switzerland and areas like that. And so in that Merovingian bloodline is the Pacers. Okay? And the Pacer family do believe that their descendant is going to be the king of Jerusalem at some point. Now, if these are the 13, all 13 will tell you we are descendants from Genesis 6. Now, they won't say Genesis 6. They'll say we are descendants from the giants, and that we are from the Tuoth Danaan, or the giant tribes. And so they believe that they are on another level, that their blood is different than yours, that their intelligence level is different than yours, that they have secret knowledge that you don't have and you're not going to get. I'm not telling you to go listen to George Carlton, He's a comedian who's now dead, but he used to have a skit called "It's a Big Club and You're Not in It." Right? He was dead on the money. It is a big club, and you and I ain't in it. All right? So the question is that we just start here and we go, wait a minute, just a second here. How can you be a descendant of a giant? You're shorter than I am. Right? I mean, that's an easy question. The giants were huge people. Why aren't these people huge? Well, let's just dive into that. All right? So Genesis 6 lets us know what went down, right? So in Genesis 6, it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, the daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God, and biblically speaking, if you trace that, that is an angelic spirit or being known as the angels, right? Not necessarily fallen angels. There happen to be fallen angels, but even the good angels were sons of God. Job chapter 1. Okay? Now, the sons of God, these angelic beings, saw the daughters of men that they were fair, okay, and that they took them wives, all of all which they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he is also flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in those days. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. So we have giants before the flood and giants after the flood. And the word giant here is Nephilim. We've talked about this ad nauseum. And the reason I'm going through this, and many of you have heard me ad nauseum teach on this, but we have new people online, we have new people in the class all the time. Listen, the average Christian quote-unquote Bible church out there teaches, well, the sons of God was the godly line of Seth, and the daughters of men were the ungodly line of Cain. Well, here's the only problem with that. You are imposing on the Scripture. That's not what it says. You couldn't cross-reference that and get that in any way. The only reason they come up with that is they refuse to believe the biblical way. But here would be my question. If angelic hosts have relations with human women and it creates giants, I can understand that. But how can godly followers of God have relations with ungodly women produce genetic beings that are giants? Giants that are as tall as Lebanon trees. Now, I don't know about you, but you ever seen a lost person and a saved person have a child? We had 3 of them. My wife didn't get saved till after CJ. Now, if CJ, his mom being of the ungodly line of whatever, and his dad being of the godly line of Jesus Christ, then I shouldn't have had a midget for a son. He's had a problem on a baseball field for years because he ain't big enough. All right? Well, then the Scripture ain't lining up. Well, it's because none of that's true. The bottom line is these 200 watcher angels come down to this planet. And what they do is they produce offspring, and their offspring are called the Nephilim. Nephilim giants. And I'm taking my time because I'm wanting to prove something. Now, the 200 watcher angels are known as what's called the Titans. Okay? These guys are the gods of mythology. So all that stuff you're into studying with Prometheus, with Zeus and Poseidon and Perseus and all that, those shows you're watching, it's based off Genesis 6. All the mythology of Greece and Rome and all that, if you go to the Samaritans and talk about the Anunnaki, if you go to Egypt and talk about their stuff, all of it's based off of Genesis 6. And so the mythology you studied as a kid isn't fake. Now, I'm not saying it's 100% accurate. I'm saying it's based off the Titans, the original 200 dudes that came down and did this. Their offspring, their original kids are the Nephilim. Those Nephilim died, but they had eternal spirits. They couldn't go to heaven when they died like your spirit does when ours do. So they roam, looking for a body to get into. So when you get into the New Testament and you find out there's these demons, which most people call fallen angels, which is not true. Demons are not fallen angels. They're unclean spirits of the dead Nephilim. Who are the dead Nephilim? The original offspring of these titans who got together with these human women. Now, I'm going somewhere. So in Numbers 13:33, which is after the flood, we send the spies in, and we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and we were in their sights. In other words, so we all know the stories that when the spies go in, they're like, hey, we can't take the land. We're grasshoppers in their sights. Now, do you think they're just flowering up the story? Do you think God's lying to you? Or do you think God's allowing these guys, like, you ever say something stupid like, man, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse? Right? No, you can't. It's just an overstatement. That's not what's going on here. What's going on here is these guys walked in. There are grapes they couldn't carry because the Nephilim had knowledge that the rest of you don't and I don't. And they were able to genetically mutate things in ways that we can't. Or, well, we're learning how to. When I was a kid, chickens weren't this big, right? You know, now they're headless, right? Now, the point I'm making here, the word giant, once again, is Nephilim. But watch. Deuteronomy 2:20. This also was the account of the land of giants. Giants dwelt therein in old time, and the Ammonites called them Zamzumans. Right? And we'll talk about Zamzumans in a second. A people great and many and tall, and the Anakims, but the Lord destroyed them before them, and they succeeded before them. All right, now check this out. We have giants, Zamzumans, and Anak. God, I can't get it. Anakims, there we go. All right. All these words would fall under the term Rephaim. It's the word Roth, and the Aim gives the male plural behind it. Rephaim. These are no longer called Nephilim. They're Rephaim. Now, you say, why did God change up? Because now what we're doing is getting a diluted descendants. So in other words, and man, I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, but I don't know how else to do this. Okay? If you have a black person and a white person have a kid, you have a mixed kid, right? So if that mixed kid goes and has marital relations with another white person, which has another white person, how long before it's diluted back? You follow me? And I'm not trying to get racist here. I'm just trying to give you an example. All right? So the bottom line is the original Nephilim were part God, or the gods, part fallen angel, part human. But as they continued to move down, they got more and more and more human in them. But they were still of the Nephilim gene line. But now they're called Rephaim. Now, we got Og of Bashan. Now, this king here is so big, he has to have a bed made of iron, and it's about 15, 16 feet long. Right? And he's from Bashan, and we've taught this in here. Bashan is up near Mount Hermon, where the Watcher angels came down. Then we have Goliath of Gath, okay? And depending on which, he's 6 cubits and a span. You had a normal cubit, but then you had a royal cubit. And you say, well, which one would you use? You'd use the royal. Why? Because the Nephilim, or the giants, or the Rephaim, were all kings. They're all leaders. And the reason being is, who was going to stop them? They're the guys setting up the dynasties. If you go and study the history behind Europe's dynasty, they all came from giants, from Nephilim. Right? Now, and we all know the story of him, but once again, he's a Rephaim. So then he's a Goliath of Gittite. So a Gittite was a Rephaim. He had 6 fingers and 6 toes on each hand. So you have 20 appendages, 20 fingers, 20 toes. Rephaim's giants had 24. They had 6 fingers on each hand. Now, you're going to think I'm stupid, but that's all right. I don't care. When the American Indian had the terminology to go how and hold up his hand like this, it was to prove to the other guy, I'm not a Nephilim. And if you don't think giants were in America, you don't understand the Smithsonian. Right? That's just a nugget for you to study. Now, and then he had 4 brothers. David kills all of them. But do you understand why David grabbed 5 stones the day he killed Goliath? Some people think, well, he wasn't trusting God. Yes, he was. He had 5 stones because he planned on killing all of them. Now, at the end of the day, he kills Goliath. The rest of them run off. He eventually gets them all. But this Goliath thing. Now, I want you to see this. Okay? There's a 6-foot man. I've showed this in here before. So you're looking at somebody that's 6'2". I'm this guy's size. And the way humans work, we're 3-to-1 ratio. As you go up, you're generally 1/3 of that wide. Okay? We work 1-to-3. According to what people have studied on the bones and different things of archaeology, that the studies would have been, they were 2-to-1. So every bit they went up, they went half that wide. So you're talking about a beast of an individual. Now, we know here would be Goliath. This would be Ogg of Bashan area. This is where we start getting up into, if you study in the book of Amos, I believe it's chapter 2, verse 8, I think off the top of my head, that God, or Amos refers to them as the height of cedar trees in Lebanon. Once again, either God's lying to you through the prophet Amos, and he's allowing him just to have a wives' tale going, or he's actually telling you the size of them. So what we believe as we study is, yes, the original dudes, based on what we've studied with different books of Enoch and so far, could have been 300 feet tall. We're talking about the original dudes before the flood. But as they go, they get smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, do you think that's far-fetched? Your same Bible says that Noah lived how many years? How long are you living? Okay. It's getting diluted down, right? Right? So we no longer live to that level. Even after the flood, they don't just start going to 70. It dilutes down. And so what's happening is, and by the way, the world before the flood would have been a whole different vegetation for these dudes to eat things. Now, we gotta get moving here. So my point is, when you say, wait a minute, well, why don't these royals who say they're the descendants of these giants, why aren't they giants? Because it's been diluted down. But they would tell you we still have that bloodline. Now, Ungers defines the Emites and the Emin as giant aborigines who occupied the land east of the Jordan River, who were deposed by the Moabites. The name Emin was derived from the fear they inspired because of the sinfulness and the size. The Zamzumanites were defined as noisemakers, likely from the thunderous bellows of their voices that the Atlanteans and the Titans were well known of. If you heard me teach about megaliths, I believe that the Nephilim moved stones around with their voices. It's all about harmonic balancing. It's all about vibration, and they were able to do it. With their large lung capacities and voices, they were able to levitate stone through sound. And you say, that's impossible. Well, there's a place in Florida where a guy did this, okay? And it's still going on. Now, the Amorites destroyed them. The word, okay, we studied that. All right, so the Avites or Avim describe it in good night. igneous giants who dwelled among the Philistines in Gaza and identified with the Hivites. And so when you're studying, and they had this snake-like quality. Now, so when you're studying the Hivites, thisite and thatite and thatite, do you understand that every true bloodline that comes down from Noah can be found in Genesis 10? It's called the Table of Nations. So if you're just reading along in the Old Testament, you're like, who's this dude? Where'd he come from? If he can't be traced back to Genesis 10, he's of this descendant. He's a Nephilim or a Rephaim. Now, the Rephites were additionally understood to be giant aborigines, much older race. The alternative translation to the Rephite reflects that at a glance, a person's heart would grow weak from the tremendous trembleness of the giant's appearance. In other words, yeah, a guy stands above you, 17, 18 feet tall. I don't care how much of a man you think you are. And they're that wide, and they can move. They're quick on their feet. But they were known as the shining ones. They had snake-like skin, or not, don't think of scales, but that kind of skin look. It kind of glowed. They had red hair about them. Their eyes were kind of shiny. Let's go on for sake of time. Man, I'm going to run out of time. Let's skip that. We'll get back to it. All right, Vlad the Impaler. Now, what was he known for? Drinking blood, right? The royals, they're descendants from him. So what is this blood drinking thing they're talking about? Okay, you go to Matthew 24 in the days of Noah, and it says, listen, in the day that the Lord comes back, it's going to be like as in the days of Noah. What was going on? They were eating, drinking, and marrying. So if you go from Genesis, you go back to Genesis 6, and you go, all right, who was marrying who? Angelic hosts were marrying human women. They were eating what? Cannibalism. They were eating humans. What were they drinking? Blood. By the way, we act like that's a big problem, eating, drinking, and marrying. Isn't that basically what you do? Right? What's the problem with having some lunch, drinking a glass of water, and marrying a wife? Unless the reference here isn't just marrying a wife, drinking a glass of water, and having lunch. The reference is cannibalism, drinking of blood, and marrying angelic hosts. Now, this drinking of blood thing, I won't go into it because they'll kick me off YouTube again. But if you study, you will find out the elites of this world still do this stuff. And careful if you study that. All right? I'm just saying. All right, now, this is the skull that was found in Caracas. They had elongated heads. The Nephilim were known for it. All right? That their head shapes were long. All right, matter of fact, here are two skulls that were found down there. This is a zero structure line. In other words, we have these cracks in our skull that allow our heads to expand or what have you. They didn't even have that. This is a Nephilim. That's a human. This is a Nephilim over here. Notice the reddish hair. All right. Now, notice that the head kind of looks alien. You think maybe it's because those angelic hosts that we keep calling aliens kind of look like that, and their offspring kind of look like that. And once again, you look into this whole thing and you start to realize, boy, that's not a normal shape, right? Well, how about here are Nephilim heads. That's a Rothschild. Now, there's some traits there. My head ain't that shaped. I remember when Alexis came out the day she was born, looking like a cone head. And the first thing I said as a young dad is like, is it going to stay like that? I mean, it's bad shape. Right? Now, Akhenaten is this guy's name. Notice his eyes. This is an Egyptian pharaoh. By the way, I don't even know if I should do it. There's a guy out there who has taken Obama, Michelle, and Beyonce and took it back to Egypt. And check that out when you get a chance. But it's through Akhenaten. Look at the eyes. Snake-looking eyes. Now, once again, if you study what the seraphims are, These are these watcher angels that came down. The Bible, the only place we have the word seraphim in the Bible is Isaiah 6, 1 and 2. And, you know, it gives you the description of the 6 wings they had. But their face looked like serpents. The word seraphim literally means fiery serpent. Literally. That's where we get numbers. It's the same word. Fiery serpent and seraphim is the exact same word. And so what is believed is that these seraphim angels were reptilian looking. So when people give you this stupid garbage that the royals are from Draco and they're reptilian and all that, no. If they are right and they're descendants of the bloodline, that's where it's coming from. So these seraphim angels that would have showed up would have had snake-looking faces with reptilian-looking eyes. They would have had 6 wings. So what do we call a reptilian that flies? It's called a dragon. So the reason the word dragon keeps showing up, Arthur Pendragon with Camelot, Dracula with Vlad the Impaler, the word dragon comes in. We'll study at some point the Li family out of the Orient. So you got China and you got Japan. What's their major symbol in China? The dragon. It's all tying back into these flying serpents. You go into Egypt. What do you have? Flying serpents. They got wings. This is still going on today. We have a disc wing that is worshipped in this country. You go up to there to your boy Washington Monument, and it's got a winged disc that stands in front of it. It all comes back to these seraphim fiery angels. Every bit of this can be traced. The problem is most of us are asleep and we don't care. Now, let me tell you, who does care? The royals, bloodlines of this world. And they will look at you like you are. They could care less if you die, because in their world, you're worthless to them. You're a rodent. You're not part of us. We're different than you guys. And what we're going to do is we're going to enslave this whole planet to work for us. And oh, by the way, we have a prophecy that we have a king coming. And that king is going to be the king of Jerusalem. And he is going to be a descendant of the bloodline of David, the Genesis 6, Aaron, Jesus Christ. And that's how he'll take the throne and convince everybody. And by the way, and I mentioned this back in December when I taught this the first time, I'm closing. All of Christianity hinges off the resurrection. Take the resurrection out, it all falls apart. It's worthless. What do you have? And if you can prove, quote unquote, that Jesus didn't die on the cross, but he lived and sent his bloodline as a aeon or a demigod down, he's not the God, then you can convince all of Christianity is false. And that's what they're going to do during the tribulation. So, all right, I'm out of time. Any questions?